Hello, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And I want to keep talking about mountains, because I just told a bunch of stories about mountains that I've climbed and why mountains are great. And then I realized that I had exclusively talked about Chinese mountains, and I have so many more mountain stories from other countries. So this will probably show up in another, this can't not show up in another story, but I met up with these two Australians in Oktoberfest who offered to let me join them driving into Austria. And I was like, that sounds great. It was a pretty easy sell. I hadn't been to Austria. They seemed like a couple of cool hippies. I like road trips, so I went with them. They had a car that his uncle, who owned an auto shop, had fixed up so they could take it because nobody had a lot of money. They were like, hey, the car works, it runs, and it did run. And so we drove across the border into Austria. I think I just handed them my passport. It was a very simple matter. And the Australians are these hippie guys. I'll talk about them more in the whole story. Maybe they'll get their own story. They're interesting fellas. And Austria is mountains. And probably outside of Alaska, the most beautiful mountains, maybe including Alaska, might be the most beautiful mountain. They're stunning mountains in Austria. But we didn't see them because we're outside of the mountain range. So you just see the outer range, and there's just a big, normal-looking mountain. And then we get to the top of it and then start driving down on so we can get to the main highway leading into whatever city we were in Austria. And the mountains were unbelievably stunning. They have just enough forest, and there's some snow on the top, and it's just beautiful. So we crest the top of the outer ring of mountains and start driving down the road. And now we have to drive down the height of a mountain, not like a tiny mountain, like a real mountain, to get down to the main road. And 20 feet, like a few seconds down from the top of this mountain, there is a horrifying crackle, grinding, bumping coming from the car. And I don't know what part it was. At that point, I still knew nothing about cars. So I was just like, that's wrong. Something mechanical is incorrect. But we're already facing downhill, and the mountain road doesn't reach the regular flat land for another thousands of feet. And his friend's like, oh, that was, haha. And then the guy whose uncle had given him the car was like, yeah, the brakes don't work. And I was like, oh, no? And he's like, no, when I push down, the brakes aren't stopping the car. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And the friend was like, are you fucking with us? Nope, can't. Or they were Australian, right? Let me do my Australian accent. No, the brakes don't work. They're shot. Nah, the brakes don't work, mate. I am pushing them down and they're not working. I can tell you right now. Melbourne. And so the car was broken, and we were at the top of a mountain, and we had to get all the way to the bottom, but we didn't want to do it by falling off the road and dying. We could have got to the bottom very fast that way, but we were trying to stay on the road. So he's like, because it's also locking the wheels every time he uses it. Something's wrong, so the wheels are like locked going left to right, so he has to like rip it back right and then rip it back left. And I was like, boy, I'm glad I'm not driving, which is like not what you want to think when you're slow motion dying down a mountain. And it's not like one road. It's not like a big slide going down to the main road. It's switchbacks. So there's like 30 switchbacks that we have to go down at a quite steep incline with brakes that do not work and wheels that are constantly getting locked in opposite positions. And our driver, who must have hated to be in that position, was struggling to turn back and forth. Credit to this dude, he struggled with that steering wheel all the way down. I don't know if it was 30, I'll say 20 switchbacks easy though. We were grinding and not dying for a long time, 15 to 20 minutes, just down switchback after switchback. And every time he made a switchback, I was like, holy shit, we didn't die again. This guy is a pretty good driver if we're still not dead. You can't get angry at the car because it's working enough that we're not dead. And then we got to the bottom and it's still grinding and sounds totally messed up. I guess I'll finish that story later, but we did make it all the way down the mountain without dying because of this Australian ex-basketball player who had like a knee surgery. I have to review. So those were the crazy Australians falling down a crazy Austrian mountain. There were the Italian mountains, which are just pretty and have orange trees and olive leaves, olive trees on all of them. And I picked up Italian okay, by which I mean barely conversational, which plays into this story a little later. I climbed a mountain in Italy because I like climbing mountains, and there was a town on the other side, and I was like, hey, let's do it. So I get to the top, and I was like, you know what, should have brought some more water since you didn't bring any. And I was like, boy, 2 hours later, really wish I had brought some water. And I just kept walking, and then all of a sudden, I was in an idyllic orange orchard, like trees everywhere, 100,000 trees. How many? Realistically, there could have been tens of thousands of trees. They were as far as the eye could see for rolling hill. There was a lot. And I immediately checked around real quick, like a suspicious person, and then ripped a bunch of oranges off and threw them in my bag. And I ripped open one and ate it and threw the peels on the side of the road. And I felt a little bad, but there were peels all over the side of the road. So it was pretty clear that people did this constantly. I'm sure I still wasn't supposed to, but this mountain saved my life? Probably not. But it definitely saved me being very thirsty and worrying about my life. I was a little anxious because I had been walking for like 6 hours and I had no water left. And then I had a sea of beautiful, perfect oranges that tasted so good, and I ate so many of them. And then I had just finished one, so she didn't see me being a thieving lout. But a lady in a pickup truck drove up and was like, hey, do you need a ride to the town on the other side of the mountain? I was like, yes, that's where I'm going. That would be great, because I still wanted water. I had eaten a lot of fruit and I didn't feel like I was going to die of dehydration, but I didn't feel super hydrated. And this random lady driving up a mountain saw someone with a rucksack on the side of the road, and she made the effort to talk to. She spoke zero English, so it was all the conversation was very broken and difficult to muddle through. It was much more like, car, town? Those are the words I understood. And then I said, yes, town. You car? And she was like, yes, and waved me in. And I got in. I was like, thank you. Me town. Hot. Ooh. and she drove me down. She was like, well, this here. Bye. Thank you. And she left. And then I continued walking after I stopped into town and had a couple Ichino? What are they called? The rice balls that are like fried on the outside? Those are good. I had one of those for the first time in that town that I made it into. And that was a very nice town. I was thinking of staying there for a while. It was just so pretty and surrounded by mountains. There was cobblestones everywhere. But I was still into backpacking and my Italian was so bad. So I just kept walking after I had my meal. And eventually I came across a mountain of olive trees and sat on my hammock, took a little nap. And then I was I was like, what are these cool looking trees? And then when I was napping under one of them, I noticed that there were olives in them. And at first I thought those olives were fruits, some kind of weird fig that I didn't know about. And then when I looked it up online, it was like, that's what a real olive is, stupid. All of the olives you know about are brined. And I was like, oh, well, now everything makes sense. And those were the Italian mountains. Wait, there's another Italian mountain thing. Oh, okay, I remembered it. I was walking along actually down a hill after that town, I believe. sloping down and walking along the coastline. So I was looking out across the ocean, and then there was this dirt path leading along a ridgeline of the mountain I was on. And I had mostly descended, so I was only a couple 100 feet up. And it was just like this parallel dirt road lined by olive trees. And something caught my eye to my left, and I looked over, and there was just a hole in the mountain, like a square hole. So I walked over there and poked my head in, and I was like, well, if any hobbits are here, I should just make myself known so I don't interrupt them. But nobody was in this little hole. So I went inside because what the heck is it? And I couldn't tell what it was. There were some slabs of rock and so on. And I was kind of confused. So I kept poking around, and then on the side of one wall, I found this metal plaque and read it and realized that it was a tomb. It was some family tomb from hundreds of years ago. And yeah, I was investigating a tomb in this little mountainside in Italy. Honestly, not much more than that. It was just interesting that I found a tomb in a mountain. Well, on to Ireland. In Ireland, I shit on a mountain like a bear in the woods. Dug a hole, did my business, covered it up, just isolated in the middle of a forest. And then 20 seconds after I started walking away from the hole that I covered, I saw a person walking through the desolate, isolated forest toward me. And I was like, where did they come from? And I don't think they saw me, and they were very casual and walked by. And I was just like, wow, I'm glad I finished 20 seconds before. I'm glad I didn't take 20 more seconds. The streams on the other side of the disgusting spectrum are very clean, the mountain streams. And I had one of those mini Sawyer filters, and I used that to filter all of my water while I was walking in the Wicklow Mountains for a week or whatever it was. Might have been 4 days. God, walking through the mountains in Ireland was so cool because there are bars in every tiny little town. So I would just stop in a bar and get a packet of crisps and a Guinness and then walk for 2 hours in the most beautiful, misty mountain area in the world, and then get some more Guinness and crisps at the next bar. And it was great. Very fun. That is also where I learned to play my first instrument, my tin whistle, which is like a recorder, but for grown-ups. It's a much more respected instrument outside of the US, particularly inside Europe, and it can sound very cool. But I think I only had one battery, and I knew I was going to be walking for a week probably over these mountains that didn't seem to have any charging points because they are mountains. I was like, well, what can I do if I'm not going to play on my phone, which will drain the battery? And I was like, why don't you get an instrument? You just never learned how to play an instrument. So I went to a music store, and I saw a tin whistle in the window, and I bought one, and it was perfect. And that's what I did on those mountains. Instead of playing on my phone, I learned how to play the tin whistle well enough, I'd say. Some people liked it. I liked it. I learned how to play the Hey Arnold theme song and a couple other theme songs on it, and a bunch of regular, just normal tunes that anyone would learn on a recorder or whatever. But it sounds a lot crisp and clear and prettier on the tin whistle, especially when you're walking through Irish forests and mountains in the mist, and you're ghostly whispering a tune through these enchanted flora. It was great. I'm probably going to go over this again because I'm definitely doing a whole Ireland podcast that trip. But it was also cool because I got to help 2 old ladies. One of them was standing on a ledge on a mountain, and it was a 5-foot ledge, and she couldn't quite get down. She was slippery because it's Ireland, so it's always damp, and she couldn't go up or down the slope. She was just stuck on the slope, but was worried about coming down. And I just happened to be walking up at that exact time at that curve in the road. And I was like, hello, can I help you? And she said, no, I'm fine. When she saw me, because I looked pretty rugged with a backpack and probably unshaven, just a dirty old boy having left, Dublin a few days ago. And I was like, I'm not going to I'll just hold out my hand. You put your hand on mine and you can safely get down that ledge. She was like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And so I put up my hand. She did exactly that and got down. And as she placed a foot onto the solid ground, her husband drove up in the car. And she said, this young man just helped me down. And he said, I was driving the car so that I could... Oh, should I do an Irish accent? You guys will love that, right? Oh, I was just driving the car up to help her. I saw her. She had trouble on the ledge. I don't know. That was okay. He was already driving to help her, and he was going to, help her down. But she was like, he was so nice. And the husband got out of his car, and he said, I think he might have come over and shook my hand or something, but he was very, very grateful and said, thank you so much. It's so nice to know that there are people who want to help other people still in this world. Or something like that. He said, you're a nice, upstanding gentleman, but in a very charming Irish accent. And, I was like, yeah, okay, bye. My stupid American accent. The worst accent. And they drove off very happy, and I was very happy. I'm not sure if it was later that day or the next day, but I was on the top of another mountain, and there was another old lady loading cords of wood into her car. And I was like, am I in an RPG? Am I supposed to... Am I proving my soul's worthiness? Is this a spiritual journey? And it certainly felt like one, like magical forests and mist everywhere. And there was this old lady hauling wood into her car. And I was like, hey, I'm just walking down the road. Can I help you load that pile of wood into the trunk of your car? She's like, would you? I was like, yeah, no, I'd love to do that. That's great. She's like, oh, that's so good of you. So good of you. And she was excited, and I helped her, and it went much faster, obviously, because she was 80. She was an older woman, and I was a strapping young buck who didn't even have to take off his rucksack to carry tiny, wee logs of wood up a wee hill into her wee trunk in the wee car. Yeah, she was also very happy, and then she asked me if I was religious, and I was like, oh, no. She was like, oh, well, you're very nice anyway, and I think it doesn't matter what religion you are as long as you want to help others. And I was like, wow, that's an astoundingly progressive viewpoint for someone the better part of a century old. If she had said something racist, I would have been like, that makes way more sense than some kind, profound wisdom. She was just very chill for an old person. She wasn't really... Interesting lady, yeah. And anyway, she was like, thank you so much. And I said, peace, homie. But in some polite way. Those are some parts of many Ireland stories that I have, which I'll get further into in the Ireland episode. Because that was an amazing backpack adventure. Hammock camping adventure. But that was very interesting that I met two people who needed obvious help to the point where I wasn't like, am I going to be interfering? It's like, no, they're alone on a mountain in need of physical help, and you are alone on the mountain and can offer that help. It's straightforward. Don't worry about if helping someone is too much help. Help them. Ask first. If they don't want it, okay, but yeah, help people. Morocco. So when I was in Morocco, my sister and I drove out into the Sahara for, I believe, 4 days. We rented a car and just drove out east. And after a while, we drove up these windy mountains, I think after the first day, where we camped in the desert. Car camped every day. I think I slept outside because I had my sleeping bag. And I don't know, it was awesome. It was in the desert. It was the coolest thing. It was great. But the next day we went up these crazy windy mountains. And I was like, whoa, these are getting high and these roads are getting thin, but this is still a two-way street. So it was pretty freaky, but we got to the top. And then after this 45 minutes of ordeal and scary mountain, windy, not real roads driving, the dirt could have just collapsed at any moment. Well, luckily it didn't. Wood knock. And that's for whoever's on those roads next. So we got to the top of these mountains and we're going to head down the other way. And there is a small mountain cafe, like maybe 10 tables, but like small personal tables that could only fit 2 people. And I was just staring. I was like, well, we should stop for that. And my sister was like, really, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, it's a mountain cafe. We're on a mountain. How is it even here? And so we stopped for breakfast, and it was a delicious breakfast with fresh orange juice that was clearly real orange juice. It was stunning. It was this super nice outdoor open roof cafe, but it had like a small terraced patio area with the tables and chairs, and there was a little picket fence around it. And it had a stunning view from the top of the mountain, of course. You could see all these windy roads that other people are driving up. It was a fantastic breakfast. So thanks, Morocco Windy Mountains. The mountains in Vietnam. So I didn't know that Vietnam was topographically divided into very clear sections of mountain country and flat country. So, not planning as is my wont, I flew into Hanoi. And I already had a plan of any capacity, which was a lot. I had a next step. I don't want to call it a plan, actually, because that's not accurate. I had a next step. I was going to land in Hanoi, buy a bicycle, and then ride the bicycle in Vietnam for 3 months. That's what I was doing. Or I was like, I'll start it, whatever. So I, first day, walked from the airport into the city, walked around, found an old grandpa selling $10 bicycles. I bought a slightly better one for like $20 because I planned to ride that bike every day. And I didn't want to think about the chain snapping right away, or, the tire popping immediately or anything like that. And then I had to choose, because that's all I had. That was my next step, buy the bike. And I was like, well, the plan's done. I was like, oh no, I still have to bike pack through Vietnam. And I had to choose right or left when I left, and that would take me north or south of Hanoi. And I was like, well, I'm in Hanoi. I guess I'll just explore the rest of the north of the country first, and then I can do the south later. And I rode my bicycle out of Hanoi, and I did not know that the entire north, especially after Hanoi, part of Vietnam, all mountains, all very steep, high elevation mountains, all mountains, and I had a bicycle. Whereas if I had gone south, little mountainous, very quickly flattens out, and the entire south half of the country is like, a few mountains, but mostly just flat. I could have just had a flat downhill ride onto flat territory. And I suspect it is not a coincidence that I never saw another tourist in those mountains for 3 months straight. The mountains were unbelievable. They were untouched. They were beautiful. I have so many of those mountain stories. Go to the Vietnam episode to hear about the man who invited me in for a feast and sang karaoke with me, the mudslides, the cool construction workers. All my stories are mountains because I rode a bicycle through mountains, which was as extremely strenuous as you're imagining. Constantly extremely strenuous, but one of my favorite experiences ever traveling. Like, it was, now that I've done it, it was absolutely amazing. And whenever I got like 20 minutes of a flat road, I was like, oh my God, this is heaven. And then there would be another incline. Oh God, the border checkpoint. Oh yes, okay. I have so many mountain stories from Vietnam. So go check out my Vietnam podcast. There are some very fun stories in there that show the graciousness of Vietnamese people and just the beauty of that country. Like, I loved Vietnam. It was great. Thailand has a lot of good mountains, and they have a lot of good overlooks and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk about the thing that stuck out most to me, though. I lived in this isolated little hut in a grove, of bamboo next to a coffee plantation for a month. Something like that. I don't know. I wanted to stay longer, but my girlfriend at the time was going stir crazy is the only way I can describe it. She thought the people were plotting against her. I don't know, but we had to leave. But during the month I was there, It's extremely serene. So during the day, if I wasn't copying my girlfriend's yoga or playing with her in a tree, we went to a waterfall one day. That was on a mountain. Anyway, there was a cascading waterfall on a mountain. That was amazing. They had those little fish that, but anyway, listen to the Thai stories. I'm glad I'm going to have a lot of Thai podcasts probably. I spent a lot of time there. Okay, the one that sticks out in my mind, when I was in that cabin, I was trying to figure out something useful to do with my time, something productive, something enriching. I was looking for something enriching to do while I was living in this isolated little cabin with my super hot girlfriend. Shout out to hot people. They need more attention, right? And I was like, you know what? Constellations, because the stars are amazing here. I was jogging at the time, and I always saw the stars at night. And I was like, the stars are so nice. I should learn what these constellations are because, I like the movie Hercules and Greek gods and stuff. There's, there's constellations up there, and it's weird I don't know about them. And this is one of the few locations on Earth where I saw the clearest skies I've ever seen. And all I had to do was climb a small mountain next to the hut that I was living in. And I just threw my head back and stared up at the sky and used an app on my phone that connected. It's that regular one that everyone uses, the Google Sky Map, whatever thing, and it tells you which constellation is which that you're looking at. And I learned pretty much all the constellations. I learned a lot of them anyway when I was there, and I could just look up and recognize them and explain them. And it was really cool to learn that at the time. And I've forgotten most of them now, but the time, it was, because it was so clear, I finally had that moment where I was like, oh, this is why they thought the stars were animals. Or this is why the night sky is divine. They thought it was a divine extravagance because there's nothing else to think when you're standing on top of a mountain staring at an infinite amount of stars. And the larger ones are making pictures. They're making lives and existences within that night sky. I remember specifically the first time I realized where the dragon was, because I had seen Ursa Major, which is huge, and Ursa Minor, which is still big, and all these constellations. And then I was like, dragon, or what's it called? The serpent, maybe? But I was like, well, where is it? And I was looking around for it. I couldn't find the section of the sky that held the serpent or whatever. And then I was like, that's its head. Right, those three. And I saw it. And then I was like, yep, that's definitely its head. And I recognized its head. And then I was like, wait a minute, because that had already taken up as much space almost as Ursa Major. It was huge. And I was like, if that's the head. And then in this cinematic, just revelatory sweep, I followed its body all the way from one horizon to the other, and it just covered the entire sky. And it was overwhelming. It was mentally overwhelming. It was not maybe emotionally, but it was it was inspirationally overwhelming. I was blown away when I saw the serpent in the sky for the first time that clearly and that large. It was just, because it felt like a serpent. It felt like one discrete animal that was as large as the sky. It was totally crazy. And that was definitely a mountainside epiphany. I had seen it. I would probably use the app before even, on the beach or something, but you don't get the same, I didn't get the same sense of revelatory vastness that I did standing atop this mountain. With zero light pollution and a countless sea of stars hanging above me. Suspended. Which is a good word because when they're that vibrant without any interfering light pollution, it does feel like the stars could come crashing down any second. And they're just making the choice not to yet. And you know what? Let's just throw in a couple of American mountains just for fun. Denver, beautiful mountains. Golden, fantastic mountains. Those are actually the mountains on the Coors beer can, the Rockies right next to the factory. And I sat on several mountains around there and climbed a whole bunch. And I had an electric bike at the time, and I just zipped right up to the top of them. Denver has great looking mountains too. Not great looking forests or fields, a little yellow and dry for my taste, but beautiful mountains, like absolutely undeniably beautiful mountains. You're welcome, USA, for being part of this. Didn't get any revelations on the top of the Denver mountains, but they were very pretty.